robbed a kid with a kitchen knife, cut his throat in the commission of an armed robbery, and I robbed him for $82. 5:35 p.m. and BOW! There was just a shit ton of money in the account.
Eric Spofford, a former heroin addict who rose from rock bottom
to worth over $100 million.
I was the youngest individual to ever be charged with a drug sales crime. Got arrested at 10 years old for selling weed.
So at 15 you were using drugs?
15 years old, I stuck a needle in my arm for the first time. I spent 2 years on just an absolute suicide run of a relapse. This is a skinny little dude, sick as a dog, and I walked to the 12-step meetings.
Was those 12-step meetings that helped?
Just saved my life, man.
His darkest days fueled a mission to save lives.
I bought a multi-family building, and I had a bunch of dudes come live with me and pay by the week and called it a sober house.
Building one of the most impactful recovery networks in the country.
And that little thing turned into 325 employees, $55 million in revenue.
What's it like to sell a business for over $100 million?
I remember just being like, oh.
We're officially closed. Congratulations, everybody.
Oh.
He's now a respected leader and mentor, inspiring others with his story of resilience and success.
You should expect nobody to believe in you until you've shown them and proven them. The people that you keep around you at times can be a fucking invisible prison.
How do you filter the people in your environment now?
A business principle that I use with relationships that I went from 25 to 55 is
So what's it like to sell a business for over $100 million? That's what I want to know. Like, what's that experience like of just, because I assume that it's a long process, right? Like everyone I've spoken to who sold a business, it's a long drawn out process. It can be tedious. And then the cash hits the bank. What was that first feeling of opening up the bank account and seeing it?
Surreal. It was surreal. I'll tell you about closing day. You know, first, I made the decision to sell the business in March of 2021, and it was 10 months later that we actually crossed the finish line of closing, which was December 1st of 2021. And so the process of this idea, talking to investment bankers, putting together, you know, a pitch deck, starting to think about due diligence, going out to a buyer list with a teaser, you know, in just this narrowing process that not a lot of entrepreneurs really understand, because there's a stark contrast of a difference of being able to start, build, and scale a business and sell one. And a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand that just because you built a business doesn't mean you're going to be good at this process. It's two entirely different sports. And so that the entire time, there's this thought in the back of my head anyway of like, this isn't real. Like, it's worth how much? Like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, nah, something's going to happen. And like, dude, I've lived a very crazy life, and a lot of crazy things have happened to me in my lifetime. And so the idea of this like blowing up in my face was very real. In the morning that we were set to close, I was like as superstitious as a person could possibly be. I'm like, something's going to happen. And it was at 10 a.m. And I went to my office. It's honestly anticlimactic. I went to my office and we got on a conference call. And on the call was myself, was the buyers, was the lawyers from both sides, the investment bankers from both sides. And one lawyer from their side took lead on the transaction. And they went around and asked each individual person, said, are you ready to close? And you had to sound off. Said, yep, I'm ready to close. And at the end, I was the last one. I said, yep, I'm ready to close. And they said, okay, the wires have been sent. This deal is closed. Congratulations. And I remember just being like, oh, there's actually a video of it on my Instagram. There's a video. If you go back far enough, on December of 2021, there's a video of me finishing this call. You can hear the guy say it's closed, answering, and me just like, the biggest sigh of relief that I've ever had in my entire life. And I remember, I wish they had kept the camera going. It was my chief operating officer, who's been my right hand or a team. Her name's Lori Boudreau. It was me and her in the room. And we'd been through this journey together. And she cut the camera, but immediately after that, I looked at her and I said, I wonder how long it's going to take for people to start suing me. and have their hands
kidding.
out. I knew my world had just changed. I knew that I just sold a business for $115 million. I knew that that put a giant target on my back. And I just knew that I was like, you know, it brings out a lot of good, but it's also going to bring out a lot of ugly. And so that was that moment. But then you're sitting there and you're like, where's my money? It's like, where's my money? And so I had all the money coming to a Merrill Lynch account. And so I have the Merrill Lynch app on my iPhone. And I sat there all day, like every 30 seconds, refreshing it. And I remember it turning past 5 o'clock. And it's like past banking hours, right? Eastern. And I was like, starting to get nervous. And I was sitting at my kitchen table in my house. I had my feet up on the table. It was 5:35. And I refreshed my bank account. And like, you know, you pull down, it has that little spinny wheel thing, and then it, you know, updates and it pops back up. And I did it right then, 5:35 p.m. and BOW! There was just a shit ton of money in the account. And I just smiled, man. I was like, it's really done now. It's really done.
And then, so what happened after that? Because the reason I ask is one of my friends sold a company for over 400 million.
Yep.
And he said that he had this, it was almost like a massive relief when the deal was done. But the same thing, he was waiting for the cash, and he kept checking his bank account. And then when the money was in there, he said he felt this elation, but also like this emptiness.
Yeah.
Because it
Dude,
was...
I'll tell you a story. So at that closing table, they announced the deal was closed, right? And I still have my email on my phone, the company email. It was 8 minutes later. I went and looked at my email and it was like, please enter your password. And 8 minutes after, they locked me out of my email. I was like, how the hell did you guys even figure out how to get to my email and lock me out in 8 minutes? And so I was out. And so, yeah, it was the craziest thing. A couple things happened. One, dude, I was the at the time executive chairman, but still very active. My phone was going off all day long. I was very useful. I was very helpful to the business. I answered a lot of questions. I helped with a lot of things. The process had been happening, the deal process, and so that was very busy. And the next day, that night, my phone was just silent. I wasn't getting any emails. I wasn't in any of the group texts. It was just like I had been excommunicated. I had a ton of money, but I was like, this is way too quiet. And I didn't know what to do. And so I was looking at, you know, buying real estate and been in real estate a long time as well as building businesses. And so the next morning, I woke up at like 5 and I met with Lori and we drove 2 hours. My office is in Salem, New Hampshire, which is about 40 minutes north of Boston, Massachusetts. And I drove to the other side of Massachusetts, about a 2-hour drive, 3 days before Christmas, having sold my business for $115 million the day before. And I'll never forget, I've told this story 100 times. I'm standing in the parking lot with a Dunkin' Donuts hot coffee. I'm freezing, I have this big winter coat on, and I'm looking at these big mill buildings. It's like 9:30 in the morning. And I got the architect here, the engineer. I'm looking at buying this thing and turning it into, you know, a development, apartments and storefronts and, you know, retail and stuff on the first floor. And Lori, my partner in crime, punches me in the arm. And I look over, I'm like, what? She looks at me and goes, we're never taking a fucking day off, are we? And I was like, probably not, you know? And so not much changed. Like my day to day, I took some time and I had no choice but to take time because I didn't have anything to do. But very quickly got bored and got right back in the game.
Is that, was there a fear there? You've come from a background of drug abuse or substance abuse. Yeah. Was there that fear there that empty space would be filled with some sort of, you know, chaos and craziness again? Or was it like, is there just an absolute drive that you have now that you just got to keep moving forward?
There was a period at that time. I had like recently gone through a breakup. And I went through a breakup in a relationship that was long-term and sold my business. And so it was like so much change in my life. And I'd also moved down to Southern Florida and I was living between both places. And so there was a couple month period in there where I was going out, I was in the nightclubs. I was staying out till 4 or 5 in the morning. I was sleeping till, 10, 11 in the morning, waking up, being like all groggy, drinking, never drank. I've been sober 17 years. December will be 18 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I never went back to substances, but I was just lost, right? Like, and so I was having a lot of fun. I don't regret it, but I blew off a lot of steam because at that time I was 36 years old, having been sober since I was 21. I'd never really been to nightclubs. I never did any of this stuff, and I especially didn't do it in Miami with a ton of money. And so I had some fun, but it wasn't more than a couple months that I woke up and was like, this isn't for me. I don't like this. I don't like staying out all night. I don't like being tired. I don't like sleeping in the morning. I don't like any of these people. They don't have any substance. I'm a God guy, recovery God. All that changed my life. It's, we're out. I was just like, this isn't my scene. And so I very quickly calibrated back into daily habits, routine, structure, putting the right people around me. And a lot of that was also getting refocused on getting back into business, getting back into building, feeling useful, having a purpose, having a team, having a mission. That's the stuff I live for. You know what I mean? I really love that. And so I started building again. We started several different businesses, a couple different verticals of real estate, and then I started building another addiction treatment business that we are full force capturing explosive growth on both of those companies today.
Okay. You said about people, right? You went from this scene in Miami of partying and running amok, and you mentioned that these people didn't have the substance that you were after. What is it that makes good people around you? You've obviously built great teams of people in order to scale businesses. What do you look for in the people that you bring into your team?
Integrity. Integrity is at the top of the list. People that you can count on, people that do what they say they're going to do, people that have a strong moral compass, right? They'll do things because they're right, whether they're being watched or not. People that subscribe, I'm big on principles or a code of conduct, right? No matter what that is, you have to be, I believe that people should be consistent and predictable, right? And so whatever that means to you, who are you? What do you stand for? Good. Don't sway from it. Be ready to die over those things. And so, just having developed internal assets of people with substance and character and integrity that are ready to stand for something, that have a high degree of work ethic, that believe in doing the right thing, that are honest, that are fair, that are value add, people that are not takers, they're givers. They wake up and they contribute to the world, they have a mission, are general characteristics of people that I think those things make people successful. And so successful people.
You're in an interview, right? A job interview. I'm assuming you've interviewed a lot of people over the years.
Too many.
What?
2 today.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going through the interview. First interview, you get the resume, you look through it all. Is there giveaways in the resume that you go, this person is probably going to be good? And then when you get to the interview, how do you interview them to figure out whether they're the right fit?
At this point, I'm final interview. I never see anyone on first, second, or even third pass. So if they make it to me, they've made it through multiple rounds with multiple different leaders within one of my organizations or both. So there's a lot of people that interview with us that I never meet because they don't make it through the process far enough. By the time they get to me, I want to know your story. I want to know who you are. Right? I want to know what you're made of. I want to know about what problems have you faced in your life? How did you overcome them? Like, how did you find solutions for these things? Tell me your story. I spend a lot of time there. Like, great, Michael, welcome. Like, if you've made it this far, buddy, like, I believe that you have the skill set for the job. So let's not talk about skills. Who are you? What's your story? How'd you get here? Tell me about your life. And so I spend most of my time interviewing, digging into that piece of it to just better understand them, who they are, their struggles, their their successes. What are you proud of? What have you overcome in your life?
And what are the giveaways? Because I assume that there's, like everyone has some form of adversity. What's the thing that makes a great person that you're going to bring into the team stand out above the others through their story? What is it that you're looking for?
People that are resilient, people that aren't scared of hard work, people that aren't scared of doing hard things and walking through discomfort. Essentially, it boils down to mental toughness, right? People that have never survived adversity, have never gone through hardship in their life, they're soft and weak by design, right? You get mentally tough and you get hardened and you become, it's like building callus on your hand, right?
I've got plenty of those.
Yeah, same, man. But we earned those, didn't we?
100%.
And now our hands are protected. So when we grab those weights in the gym, we're not worried about ripping our hands. But when we started working out, we used to get blisters and like, oh, goddamn. And so just people that have general callous in life, that life is hard, right? Business is even harder. It's incredibly challenging and difficult. And so, people that are just down to ride on that. Like this, I don't lie. The other thing that I spend a lot of time doing that I should touch on is that I spend a lot of time educating people on the opportunity and trying to talk them out of it. I do not sell anyone. My team's already done that. My team's told you how great we are. My team's told you about the future and the benefits of being here and how fun of a group it is and how we're creative and, entrepreneurship driven. All that's already happened. By the time you get to me, I'm gonna look at you and be like, Michael, this is gonna be really hard. In fact, this is probably the hardest job you're ever going to have. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't lie to them at all. I said, we are crazy people. We are obsessed at what we're doing. We're obsessed with winning. I don't apologize for that at all to anyone. And if that's not who and what you are, if you don't have that running through your blood, you're in the wrong interview. And there are plenty of jobs in corporate America that's going to give you a desk, give you a paycheck, give you a 401k and some PTO and benefits and all of that stuff, and you're going to be able to hide out in the company and do your job at a bare minimum level. This is not it. You will die here if that's you. You will not make it.
I'm going to cut that section out of this podcast and I'm going to send it to every final interview that I have. Because I actually had that interview. I've been interviewing salespeople for the last week, and in Australia, I've been getting up at 5 a.m. to do the interviews. And it is interesting, the response, because what I find is my team try to tell them about all the opportunities. And then when they come to me, I'm like, this is who we are. Highly strung, tightly wound. We got shit to do. We get it done. My community is called the Driven Mofos because everyone I work with is extremely driven. They're super ambitious. We don't get people who go to motivation events. They go to motivation events and I'm like, you need to stop doing that shit because you're already overworking and burning yourself out. Like, you can't switch off. You need to have like a dial to dial it back just every now and again.
Yep.
They don't know how to do that. My community is not those people. But what I found is out of the three candidates that I spoke to, one straight away said, I'm not your guy. And I found that quite interesting that,
I promote it. I tell them, I said, listen, I will respect you. There are too many people that'll look me in this time and say, yep, Eric, I'm about the business. And then they'll come in here and find out that they're not. They lied to us and they lied to themselves for the opportunity, and they think that we're kidding when I said it. I assure you, I am not joking about this. Like, I mean every word that I say in the most literal sense that you could possibly understand it. Like, so if this isn't you, bow out now. Like, just tell us now and save us both. You have a nice job. Don't resign from it. Go find a different opportunity. Like, it's going to be better for everyone if you're just honest now. So I spend a lot of time. And I can't tell you how many times they've gotten to me and then failed, flunked out. They're like, we thought that guy was great. What happened? I'm like, I told him the truth. He chose not to. Like, it is what it is. Better to find out now.
It's crazy
because we're obsessed.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like your team's the same way. Like, we are obsessed. I will text you. If I wake up at 2:30 in the morning, I will fucking text you. Like, I don't care. Like, I have no boundaries. Do not expect me to have a boundary. I'm not going to. My team at my last company that I sold would show up, and some of them would come in early. And they'd like to leave early, so they'd start the day at like 6:30, 6, 7 sometimes. And they would come in, and I would be in pajamas in the conference room with 2 giant whiteboards with marker I woke up at 2 a.m, came in with the idea, you know, and I am like putting out the whole thing, and I'm like this mad, crazy person. And they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Not really."
I'm glad I'm not the only psycho that their team rock up in their pajamas.
It's obsession. It is, and I think that, you know, there are people that that become entrepreneurs, and there are people that I think anyone can learn it, right? The tactical skill sets, and I think anyone can, you know, find a business idea and learn it if they want it bad enough. But then there are those chosen few who just have this running through their blood. And I don't know if they're born, I don't know if God made them that way. I don't really understand it. I just know that I'm one, and when I meet another one, we're like two kindred spirits that understand each other. And the rest of the world seems like a really fucked up place for guys like us.
It is.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And it's just, I'm obsessed. And there's no turning it off. I make time for different things, but in the back of my head, I'm still working. It never ends. I wake up in the middle of the night because I'm getting a little old, so I got to pee around 3, 4 in the morning, and I'm standing there going, like, I can't wait to wake up. I'm like, I have to put myself back to sleep to get that last couple hours to then wake up fully rested, but I don't even want to because I'm like ready to go. I'm so excited about this and so obsessed about everything that we're doing that at nighttime, I have to take magnesium and melatonin, dissolvable melatonin, just to put myself to sleep because it's time to go to bed. I'd rather just keep going. It's not
exactly.
practical, though. Yeah.
I know exactly. I do that. Not the melatonin. I only actually, I tried melatonin for the first time when we got to Miami because my sleeping patterns were so screwed up. But your exact definition of what we call the driven mofos, I mean, that's why we're over the other side of the world doing podcasts, right? Like we just packed up our shit and invested and we're like, right, let's go, let's make this happen.
I love it.
What you said you're not sure whether people are born with that enthusiasm. Where did yours come from? Like there must be a defining moment, or as a kid were you always that crazy and like...
I've been like this my entire life. I was actually, last night I was at dinner in Orlando at the resort that we're at, Four Seasons, on the Disney property, and a waiter came over and he heard my accent. And I don't know if you guys can tell because you're not from America, but my accent's a Boston accent. So he's like, "You from Boston?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I grew up in this little city outside of Boston." I was like, "Oh, I know that city. I used to go there when I was 14 years old because they had a cigarette shop that would sell to minors because you had to be 18 to buy cigarettes. But this one old guy, he didn't care how old you were. He never asked for an ID. And so nobody knew about it in my high school. So I went there and I used to buy boxes and boxes of cartons of cigarettes, and I would come back and sell the packs for 3x what I paid for them. And that was one of my businesses in like the 8th grade. And you know, that's actually a PG rated story. I've been like that my entire life. When I was younger than that, my parents got divorced when I was 10 years old. I was in the 5th grade. And my dad went and did his thing, and we didn't have all that much. I was living with my mom at the time and in an apartment, and my mom was working a job, and there was not an excess amount of money for things that I wanted. And at the time, this certain type of jeans were very cool. They were like the cool jeans to have. I had to have them.
They weren't FUBUs, were they?
Jinkos.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember Jinko jeans. A brand like FUBU, but not FUBU. And they're very popular. And the only thing that I wanted at that time was I wanted to buy, my mom told me I couldn't have them. I could have the Levi's and the Wranglers because they were affordable, and I could not have these jeans. I wanted those jeans, and I wanted to be able to go to this pizzeria that had video games and order as much pizza, soda, and play as much pinball as I wanted to play. And I didn't want anybody to tell me that I couldn't do these things. And so I started selling weed. And I did. I went to one of the older kids in the neighborhood, and I was like, you know, put me on. And I was 10 years old.
No kidding.
And I hold the record for my home state. I believe to this day, I was the youngest individual to ever be charged with a drug sales crime.
No kidding.
Yeah, I sold weed, but you know, when you're that young, I got caught quick. And so a kid ratted me out and told on me, and I got in trouble, and I got off the bus, and the police were in front of my apartment building and got arrested at 10 years old for selling weed.
How did your parents handle that?
They were pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty pissed.
I was going to
but-
say, everyone I know who's from the Boston area anyway, normally they're pretty tough.
Oh, tough as
Their
nails.
parents are
Both
tough.
of my parents, tough as nails. Yeah, so I got in a little bit of trouble, but that was that entrepreneurial, like, nah, man, I'm gonna get it. You know what I mean? I'm gonna have it. And so I've had businesses and hustles, some illegal, some legal, just my entire life. It's been a nonstop obsession. But of course, that led me down a wrong path. I started using drugs and alcohol, became addicted to drugs and alcohol, and almost lost my life many times during that dark period of my life, which was really from 15 till almost 22 years old. About
So at
7
15, you were
years.
using drugs
At 15, I was shooting heroin. I was an IV heroin addict
at
by
that
15.
young.
Yeah.
What got you into it? What was it?
Older kids.
Okay.
My parents got divorced. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. That was a messy thing. My home was very unstable, loud, chaotic. And so I don't know, right? The fact is that I was surrounded by a bunch of older kids that I emulated and wanted to be like. They were cool. And they were making money selling drugs, and they were partying, and they had the pretty girls, and they started doing heroin. And so I started doing heroin. And it was pretty much that simple. I mean, it was really the birth of the opioid epidemic. It started with Oxycontin, a pharmaceutical drug.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was in Australia or not, but in America, in the late 90s, early 2000s, it blew up, which created what now today it has been America's opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
So,
We just watched Painkiller. I don't know. Have you seen it? Or
I
watched
don't know.
it? It is one of the best
I
TV
lived
series
it.
I've watched. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
one of the best TV series we've watched.
I'll put that on the list. But
Yeah.
me and my generation, my friends, we were kind of the first ones, the pioneers of that. When Oxycontin first hit the street and it was first made noise, we were doing it. That was probably 1999.
Wow.
And right about then. And then that turned into heroin for me a year later in 2000 when I was 15 years old.
Was it the drive for more? Was it the drive for excess? Or was it the drive for the high? Or was it just that other people were doing it and you just thought, why not just go from oxys to heroin?
Heroin became more available.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was cheaper, more readily available. The oxys would come and go, and I got a actual addiction to it where I physically needed opiates or I would go into withdrawal symptoms. And so what happened was I had the addiction, and then the oxys weren't around, and the heroin was, and it was either go without or use the heroin. And a girl who was kind of that girl of my teenage years, she had started using heroin, and then so I ended up using it with her. And then, you always I think in addiction, you always think like, oh, I'll just do it this one time. And then, I'll go back to the OCs because those aren't as bad. Once I touched heroin, I never used another OC. And I was just on a straight run, about 6.5, almost 7 years of shooting heroin and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Other drugs, crazy life, street, in and out of jail. Went through a lot.
Where did the money come from to support that habit? Was it selling
drugs, robbing drug dealers, sticking people up, all sorts of crazy stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the moment where you realized that enough was enough and that something had to change?
I had been robbing drug dealers, and that was how I was getting by. And in a drug deal gone bad, I robbed a kid with a kitchen knife and gave him a cut on his throat, which I didn't mean to do. But they said I cut his throat in the commission of an armed robbery. And I robbed him for $82, December 6th of 2006. That night, after I robbed him, I used this money to buy heroin, got high. The police were looking for me. And so I was hiding in the closet of a drug house, a trap house. As the police, I could hear them outside, see them outside, blue lights everywhere. They were searching for me for the robbery that I'd just done. And I spent all night hiding in that closet. And at a certain point in the middle of the night, it was very quiet. The police had left, but I was still too scared to come out. And I don't know what time it was, but I got on my knees for the first time ever. I wasn't raised religious, never went to church once in my entire life at that point, but I didn't know what else to do. Because I tried to get sober and failed like 100 times. It wasn't like, I didn't like make a decision to better my life, and things have been great since. I had at 17, I was trying to change my life. I spent 5 years constantly trying to break this cycle. And so the one thing I hadn't really tried was prayer. And I got on my knees and prayed and said, God, I need your help. I don't know if you're real. I don't know if you're listening. I don't know if you care. But if you are and you do, it's your guy Eric over here, and I need a little help. I'm in a jam. And I got up the next morning, went on the run for armed robbery, fled that city, and haven't used a drink or a drug since.
So was that moment that you just stopped? Did you have to go to rehab or?
I should have gone to rehab, but I didn't have any money or insurance, and so I was trying to get into a place, and I ended up going through the withdrawal process, just sitting on my mom's couch, toughing it out. She let me come back and stay on her couch for a little bit, and I was walking to 12-step meetings. And
So it was those 12-step meetings that helped?
Saved my life, man. Saved my life.
Wow.
And in those 12-step meetings, they really taught me the ethos of some of the stuff that I carry today, which is like, I was surrounded by a group of men, and I knew they cared about me. I knew they loved me, but they were so hard on me. Like, they loved me enough to tell me the truth, but they told me the truth with kindness. They weren't this like in-your-face, arrogant, egotistical, beating me up type of thing. They were like very kind and very loving, but everything they said really hurt my feelings. But I couldn't argue with them because I knew they cared about me and I knew what they were saying was true. So I was like, fuck, they got me, you know? And they just developed such a relationship with me that I would listen to anything that they said. And these guys are like old timers, like been in AA sober for decades. And, you know, I owe my life to those guys. I really do. A lot of them have since, you know, left this planet and passed on because a lot of them were older guys. Some of them I still stay in touch with. But, you know, when I got sober, you talk about selling a business for 115 million. I got sober. I had 2 pairs of clothes. Didn't have a driver's license, didn't have a car, didn't have any money. I'd been unemployable for years. I had warrants in multiple areas. I, you know, was probably going to go back to jail. I had a credit score that was like the worst possible credit score you could have. I was a habitual offender, had lost my license for multiple years for bad driving stuff. I had stolen and robbed from everybody that I knew. I didn't have a single person that would pick up my phone call. I'm like 202 pounds today. I was like 135, 140 because I just wouldn't eat because I was so strung out on drugs. Just emaciated, this is skinny little dude, sick as a dog. And I walked to the 12-step meetings.
So where did the drive to become an entrepreneur come from? So you've gone through all this process, you've got drugs, the dealing, everything like that. What was the day where you sort of went, you know, I'm going to start a proper company and build that and build a team of people around me? Like, how did that,
you know what's funny?
How did that happen?
I've always been an entrepreneur, and then I ended up in this circumstance of being in recovery from addiction. And what happened in that recovery process in the first year and a half was I caught fire for life. And the main driving thing that made me feel alive was helping other men get sober and find recovery from addiction. And I was doing it as a volunteer. I was doing it for free and for fun. And that was the pinnacle moment where I was like, I'm going to start a sober house. I'm going to buy I always loved real estate, the idea of real estate, business, hustle, make money. Now I'm helping people, and all of it just came together in the perfect storm. And that was the inception of the business, which was October of 2008. I was 23 years old.
Wow.
I bought a multifamily building with the help of my dad, co-signing on the loan. It was bank owned at the time for $150,000, 3-unit building. I got the furniture donated. I moved into it, and I had a bunch of dudes come live with me and pay by the week and called it a sober house. And that little thing turned into being the largest provider of addiction treatment services in New England. 325 employees, $55 million in revenue, and I sold it for $115 million. But that's where it started.
So you started by, first of all, convincing your dad to co-sign for that building. How did he have the trust for you that you were going to do something good with it, not just use it for drugs?
At that point, my dad had seen the change. Like, the first 6 months I was sober, he wouldn't even speak to me. Like, he was like, yeah, I've heard this so many times. Like, let me know when you've been sober a long time. Like, I don't want to do it again. I don't even want to listen to the bullshit. And so he wouldn't talk to me for a while. But then after a while, we started talking again. My father owned a small tree removal and excavation company. Just him and a couple guys. He did the work. And so I went back to work with him. I said, Dad, give me a job. You know, let me come back to work. Let me help you out. And so we started working together. And so he wouldn't let me live with them. He wouldn't let me, I ended up in a little studio apartment in a terrible neighborhood that was $550 a month. And, he wouldn't help me out, but he gave me an opportunity to come back to work. I think I made like $12 an hour cutting trees down with him, but it put us together every day.
Yep.
And so I would show up on time, I would show up early, I would show up sober, I would work hard all day, and little by little, like, he saw that. And then when I celebrated a year of sobriety, it's traditional in 12-step meetings that you celebrate your anniversaries. And so at my home group, which is the meeting, you go to a lot of meetings, with this one I was a member of, they had, anniversary night, and I was the speaker because I was celebrating my first year of sobriety. And my dad came to the meeting, and I lived like 40 minutes from him. And so he drove out. I invited him to come. He'd never been to a meeting before. He just knew I went to them, and they helped me a lot. And he sat there. It was a men's meeting, so it was only men, no women. And on average, there were like 60, 70 dudes sitting there doing recovery, doing sobriety together. And I spoke and told my story, but the second half of the meeting was just other men that, were just giving unbiased feedback of what they've seen me accomplish in the last 12 months, of my turnaround, of my recovery process, of my dedication to helping other people. And my dad saw it. And I think that was a giant pivotal moment where he heard it from other people because he was able to sit in that meeting. And my dad actually presented me with my first medallion for a year of sobriety. And that's why he came there, now that I think of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
You said that these other men around you told you harsh truths. What were some of those harsh truths that they told you that you needed to hear?
You know absolutely nothing about being successful with your life. Your thoughts, opinions, and ideas gave you this result. So why don't you shut up? And why don't you try to forget everything you have that you know or you think you know? And why don't you listen? And I would go to tell them what I think, right? You know what I think is, and they go, okay, kid, you're here because you want what we have. We don't want anything you have. So shut up. We don't even want to hear what you have to say. I'd be like, damn. It's like, okay, got it. And then they would just tell me what to do. Show up early, pick up, set up the room, do the coffee, do this, do that. And they just gave me a lot of discipline on things that I need to do every day, instructions on how to live. They basically took over my life and told me, do this, do that, do this, do that. Don't hang out with them. Don't go there. Do this work. Start praying. Go to the gym, personal development, And the difference, I think, for me was when they said something, I had the humility to just shut up and go, okay, I'll do it.
Well, I think in a world of social media, a lot of younger people need to hear that. just that alone, that should be the thing that pops up on your screen every morning.
Yeah.
When you use social media, because there's so many. Well, I mean, you see it on social media, right? Like everyone has an opinion. Doesn't matter what they've achieved, where they've come from, what they've done. But it seems that everyone has an opinion for your life and how you should operate. Yeah. Sorry, my nose is is crazy in here. Something that I'm really fascinated about is you've now gone from recovery to that first investment property that help men with recovery and so on. What then was the steps that you had to create as an entrepreneur to keep growing the company? Like, from what I've seen, is there's different versions of yourself that have to keep changing as you grow. Oh my
God, that's accurate.
Yeah. How do you like, what was the first step? What was the second step that you really noticed, which were the big shifts that you had to learn through your entrepreneurial journey?
Going back to the beginning, God, I feel bad for the first few employees that I had.
Same.
I should probably call them and apologize. I had to learn how to manage people. That was, it was me doing all the work, right? The business was a business of one. It was me. And then I knew that if I wanted to grow, I needed other people and I needed them to do some of this work and I needed to be able to work through them. And so then I figured that out. And that took me quite a ways, right? That took me to very quickly, I grew the business. I added additional sites. I added additional service lines. I started an outpatient and I built a nice little business. And by the time I was 26, 27, I made my first $1 million in a year. And that was probably 2011, 2012. And then I kept going, right? And I kept going and I kept going and I kept going. And I continued to sharpen my sword and get better at managing people, at developing systems, at developing processes. But it was still very much a dictatorship. Like, all roads came to me. Like, I didn't trust people to make decisions. I didn't trust anybody. Like, I just had to do it all. What ended up happening several years later was the business consistently started to grow, but I started to recognize that I was its greatest asset and its greatest liability, right? Because I was the one driving the show every day, but I'd also become the bottleneck for future growth. And so when it was like 2017, around then, that I recognized that my org chart, I think I had, it's either 14 or 17, I can't remember the number, direct reports. It was like every department reported to me. I was the leadership team. I was it, the one-man show. And I started looking at it, and I was making a ton of money. The business was plateaued, though. I couldn't grow it anymore and I was working 16 hours a day, being reactive, playing defense, addressing issues. Everything was coming up at me, and it was coming from so many different verticals because the entire business ended up at me, that I had no freedom of time. And so I was like, I have to learn how to delegate. I have to learn how to train and trust other people. I have to learn how to verify, right? Trust but verify, hand this to leaders. And so that was a big thing where I started to buy back my time through handing things to people, developing systems, process, an org chart, hiring leaders. And so that allowed further growth. The next phase, which was monumentally instrumental in growing the business, but also selling it, was that I started to hire people that are smarter than me. So many entrepreneurs are a prisoner to their own ego because they don't even realize they're doing it. They have to be the smartest guy in the room. And so they hire people that they're not intimidated by. And they hire people that their ego is satisfied by that person needs the answer from you. That person needs to come to you because you're the big boss around here. And so I hired people in their departments that were giants. My chief people officer in HR was like a chief people officer in 25 years of HR experience for companies that were much larger and much more sophisticated than mine. New things. I learned from her. Every time I spoke to her, I learned something new. I hired a chief operating officer, a guy named Scott. Scott, I'm a 15-year-old high school dropout that figured it out. I don't even have a GED, like one of those fake diplomas they give you. I don't have one of those. Scott's largest job on his resume was he was the chief executive officer of a $2 billion publicly traded kidney dialysis business. Like, he was the CEO of a $2 billion publicly traded business. And I hired him as my chief operating officer as a succession plan to replace me. And so he came in and I just learned from him. And so I think being able to, and all of that, and I talk about this a lot, that your level, and this is so cliche because so many stupid people on Instagram say it, but it's true, which is that your level of success will never outgrow your level of personal development. If I didn't have my foundation of personal development is recovery, and there's a lot of things that have been added to that since. If I didn't have that personal development work, I would not have the ego strength and the humility to surround myself with leaders that I could learn from. And so I showed up to work every day like a fucking student. Like, what are we doing today? And I built this leadership team that so many people build leadership teams of like, oh, Joe over in sales or in operations, he's done a really good job. I think he can do it. I think he's the guy that can be the leader, the director, the VP of the department or whatever it is. If you're at $10 million of revenue, or even if you're at $50 million of revenue, if you're at 10 trying to go to 20, or you're at 50 and trying to go to 100, You're hiring the guy that has only worked at that level of a company and betting your future and the company's future on them being able to figure it out and getting it to the next level. What I did was the exact opposite. I hired people that had already been to 100 and brought them down to my level because they've already done the learning curve. Some of them had already done it multiple times. And so they've already taken this. So the entire time I'm asking them questions. And of course it's a two-way street. They're learning the nuance of this business, and I have some value to add. Not to say that I didn't have value at that period of time to that team of people. I did. But by hiring people and having the ego strength to show up to work and listen to people that I signed their paycheck, but they're teaching me, because they are giants and they are much more experienced in their individual roles in their departments. That is what took that thing. When I did that, I went from $25-30 million of revenue to 55 like that. And the value, my first deal that I sold 10% of my business at a $40 million valuation.
Nice.
My first deal was $4 million for $10 million bucks. And in 2 years, just about 2 years, the valuation of the business as a result from doing all that went from 40 million to 115. And there's a big difference between a valuation of a company and what you actually transact at.
Yeah.
You can go get an appraiser to be like, a business appraiser to be like, oh yeah, this company's worth 115 million. Can you get somebody to write you a check for it?
Yep.
And so they wrote me a check at 40 million. I implemented all of that stuff that I just broke down, and the valuation of the business almost 3x'd in 2 years. And they wrote me a check for 115.
How do you find those people? Because we've made that mistake before where you hire someone who's further ahead, but they're used to operating at a different level. Like when you're in a startup phase, you hire someone who's used to working with systems and process and infrastructure, and they're almost too slow. How do you find the right people for the right stage?
The right people, so I talked about where they were at. The right people had been where we were at and taken those companies on the ride. And so they fully understood what the company and the life cycle that it was in at that time was, because they'd been at least once, most of them 2 or 3 times in businesses at that level, and then grown them from there up.
So they've had to be on the ride from there
100%.
up. Because I think that's a mistake that we made.
People that graduate with the Harvard MBA that enter the business up here that have never operated at this level. I've had the same experience where I thought it would be great, but they die coming down down here. There's not enough oxygen for them at this elevation. You know what I mean? Like
I know exactly what you mean.
100%. And so, no, it was all the people had been at that level and taken that ride. And I get asked all the time how I found that leadership team, because we had such unbelievable results. And no one likes the answer. I used the best recruiters that I could find, and I wrote enormous checks to find the people.
What happens when you don't have the money? So you don't have the money to write those checks. What do you do?
For the recruiter?
Yeah, like when you were starting on the way up, I assume that you just didn't have a ton of cash like the best recruiters.
At the time, I was, for sure. I mean, like everything else in entrepreneurship, you do it yourself. Get on LinkedIn and send the messages yourself. That's what recruiters are doing. They're going in and casting a big net and talking to a lot of people and building a network. And then whatever your business is, like we were addiction treatment, right? Addiction and mental health treatment. You know who your competitors are. A lot of times, you look at the person the role that you're trying to replace, you can look one for one. So if it's the VP of marketing, then you might look to hire your competitor's VP of marketing. But that's a lateral move for that person. So it's not as sexy for them, right? Instead of doing that, who is the VP? Who's their number 2? Who's the next person that's getting that work done underneath that person, and target them for an upward move into your company, because they're bottlenecked there, right? That VP either needs to quit, die, or get a promotion in order to make space for them to move up in the organizational chart of that business. And so a lot of people will leave companies to get an upward move, an upward trajectory in a competitive business, because it's the only way they're going to hit that level.
That's brilliant. I heard Richard Branson does that with Virgin, with the Virgin Group. Apparently, he goes out and always looks for his competitors' chief operating officer and then recruits them as their CEO.
And this is, this, it rides the border of ethics, but I'll tell you, another amazing thing that helped me a ton was interview the competition. And so who's successful at what you do? Great. Go open up Rex and interview the people. Because when you think about what an interview is, you're looking for talented people, and the whole premise of what we're doing here is you're coming here and I'm going to ask you a ton of questions.
Yeah.
So I would just have like this questions list of like, so tell me, how do you do this? And
so you do it through the interview?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. That's brilliant.
Yeah, you're VP of marketing, you're whoever, operations. And so, it's just a great way to gather and build a network of people. Even if you're not ready to hire that role right at that time, you go and you meet this person, then you build a relationship with them. That's another thing that I did very well was I would interview and meet a lot of people, and then I would stay in touch with them. I would just touch them, at a somewhat frequent thing, I might just call you and be like, hey, Michael, it's Eric. What's up, man? Been a couple months. What's cooking over there? What are you guys working on? Yeah, no, we got this thing. And how the kids? I also wrote down, when I would meet people, I would take like a couple little facts about them. Normally about their kids, their family, or something like that, something meaningful to them. I don't really care if you know what my favorite color is. Like, I don't give a shit. But if you know that my kid loves animals, and you know what I mean? And you remember that, and 3 months later you call me up and you're like, hey, Eric, how's Gavin doing, man? He catch any of those crazy animals lately? And I'm like, damn, this guy remembered that. Like, cool. And so I would use those tools to build relationships with people.
Yep.
And then through the equity of the relationships that I would build, then I'd be able to call favors. Like every call isn't, hey, Michael, do you know anybody that does this? Or do you know anybody that does that? Some of it's just calling the bullshit. 5-10 minutes. Just checking on you, man. Don't want to take up too much of your day, but hope you're well. Cool, bye. Let me know if you're in town. See ya. And then when I need something, hey, Michael, do you know? Oh, yeah. And so that was a very powerful tool as well on the way up.
That's
that
amazing.
Network, yeah.
How do you filter people now? Like you've got a shit ton of money, you got a jet, you got the boat, you got, all this cool stuff. They're the things that most people think they want in life, like they froth over it.
Yeah.
How do you filter the people in your environment now?
I have, I don't know, for lack of better words, like a buy box of who fits the criteria of things that are important to me. And even then people sneak in and people pretend and you find out who they really are. A business principle that I use with relationships is like I do my best at interviewing them, but what's the most important thing in recruiting, right? Is do the best job you can in interviewing, but also fire fast.
Yep.
The second you know. And so, I'll give anyone an opportunity. And when they show me who they are, I, at this point, have been through so much shit with people that I just believe them quickly. Like, I'm not going to argue with you about who you really are.
Yep.
You show me that side of you, I'm like, all right, cool, got it. You know what I mean? I'm going to love you from a distance, take a little bit of space. And so I put a lot of distance between people that show me that they're the wrong people pretty quickly. I've made a lot of those decisions over time. They're important to be able to do, right?
Yep.
And then, the right people show themselves, and they last the test of time.
That's interesting you say that, because I have a lot of clients that I've worked with over the years who are rich listers, and I have a friendship group, like billions of dollars worth of contacts on my phone, and I find many of them are very hesitant to bring new people into their environment. Whereas I've always been someone who, if you ask my wife, I trust everyone until I don't trust them. Once I don't trust you, that's it. It's done.
I'm the same way. Listen, I refuse to let success, money, status, attention, or any of this other stuff like callous me as a human being. Like, I fucking love people, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I really do. Like, they're God's kids. I still maintain a good relationship with, my spiritual life and my faith and all of that. And so, understanding that God doesn't need anything from us. He's God. But his kids do. You want to do something for God, do it for his kids, right? I don't need anything. There's not a lot you could do to help me. Maybe a little bit, but not a lot, right? Do something nice for my kids. It means the world for me. God, I see him kind of the same way. And so I love human beings. I have relationships with all sorts of people. I think another thing that is a miscategorization of people that find some success is they think they're different than normal people. I don't feel any different than fucking anyone else. Other people might see me differently at times, and that's a confession of their character, not mine, right? And I could feel that. And that's one of those things where I'm like, ooh, nah, I'm gonna put you over here. But if you can come and have an authentic relationship, a friendship, have principles, be a cool person, I don't care how much money you have, I don't care about any of that. Like, I just refuse to let all of that kind of change my heart and change how I approach relationships. But the other side of that coin, or the other edge of that sword, is I'm the same way. You show me that for 5 seconds, I'm out.
Yep.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, you grew up in a I guess in a challenging way with the drugs and so on.
Yep.
Your kids now, they can pretty much, I assume, have what they like if they need it from dad. How do you manage that? How do you manage their expectations? Because I'm assuming they go to school. Like you said, you've got a teenage son.
Yep.
He goes to school. The other kids must know that dad's rich.
Yeah.
How do they, and when I say rich, I use that terminology because that's how kids think, right? Like, you're either rich or you're not.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that conversation with them, and how do you navigate them creating that work ethic and that drive and that ambition when...
I think you said it perfectly. Dad's rich. You're not rich. Dad is.
I love that.
You are actually very poor. You have nothing. It's like, and so that's exactly it. Like, I've worked very hard in my life, and I've accomplished a lot and been able to be very successful, and you're going to need to too. And so they don't have everything they want. Like, I don't actually believe in that, And so my kids, my youngest is about to turn 3, so I'm really talking about my oldest, who's 13. But I make him work, man.
Does he have to fly economy, or does he get to go on the jet?
Well, I'm not going to put him on a different plane, but so when he's with me, he flies on the jet. But other than that, he'll fly economy. But it's little things like he's got a job. Like, he is a crew member on my yacht, and he works for my captain.
Nice.
And he goes there and he makes an hourly wage. And this is funny. I said, when I first cut the deal with him, he's been doing it about a year and a half. And I said, I'll give you a minimum wage. And he was probably 12 at the time. I said, for a 12-year-old, minimum wage, that's pretty good, He says, yeah, all right, Dad, how much is minimum wage? I'm like, I don't know, let's look it up. How much do you think minimum wage is? In my head, I haven't looked at this in a long time. In my head, it's like maybe $8 an hour, right? It's minimum wage. It's friggin' $12 an hour. I said, you're gonna be shitting me. And so, I pay him minimum wage, and he goes and he cleans the boat and waxes it and does whatever the captain tells him to do. And he saves his money, and if he wants to buy something, that's how he does it. But it's honestly one of the greatest challenges, because one of the things that helped me out was, I grew up, my dad, I never went hungry, but we didn't have, I didn't have access to all the stuff that I wanted. I grew up wanting stuff and having to figure out how to get it.
Yeah.
And he's going to grow up the same way. I don't give a shit how much I have.
I love that, because I was interviewing Bedros Keuilian, and we're having this conversation, and he said exactly the same thing. You're not rich, dad's rich, because the kids at school were saying, your dad's rich. And something that he spoke about was, if they would fly just, around America, he would specifically fly economy class just so that the kids had to learn what it feels like. So when they did sit in first class or business class, especially internationally, they would, they would appreciate it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would want to do that, but, I thought that was pretty cool.
I'd probably be sitting in the front of the plane, checking on him in the back. You guys okay back there? Yeah, man.
So what are you most proud of in your life these days? When you look back, what makes you proud?
God, man, I've been, my life has been unbelievable. I've been able to do some pretty remarkable things. It's also been very challenging. I haven't had an easy life, but I've had a meaningful one, and one filled with purpose. I'm really proud of the work that I've done with people that have addiction and alcoholism. and helping them find sobriety. There's rarely at this point a day that goes by that I don't receive a message from someone or their loved one or their mom or their wife or their husband talking about the impact that I was able to make in their life somehow, and have them find, sobriety and, help them get sober over time. That's something I'm very proud of. And related to that, I'm proud of my involvement in kind of this movement of making sobriety cool, right? I coined a phrase, sobriety is a superpower, that took off. And a lot of people say that now. I thought of that randomly while I was writing up a post or speaking or something. And so, making that, giving young people, all people, but especially young people, a role model and a culture that they could choose to be a part of, that embraces sobriety, embraces success, embraces personal development, and makes all of that stuff cool. When I was growing up, sobriety, I didn't know anyone that was cool that was sober.
Same.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when I got sober, 21 years old, my entire peer group, there was all the men, I told you, they were all 20, 30, 40 years older than me. And my entire peer group in their early 20s made fun of me. Like, literally clowned me because I chose to get sober. And so giving them something to make a choice on, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a cool scene that you can be sober and still be cool. I'm really proud of that, and that's really important to me. And so a lot of that's just that stuff, man. Like the stuff, like I think about the funeral, I think about mortality a lot, and like, what's my legacy? What am I gonna leave behind? What's the imprint that I'm gonna leave in this world if I got hit by a bus today? I think a lot of it's that. The money, they'll argue and fight over it at some point, and, they'll probably spend it all in this generation or the next one, whatever. But they can't take away the impact that I made in people's lives, and kind of pushing that movement forward,
Yeah.
And so, and I've been on that scene doing that sobriety work for 17 years. So it's added up a lot. I think that would be the thing I'm most proud of.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned before you sold the business, then all of a sudden the cash hits the bank account, and you said, I was waiting for someone to sue me.
Yeah.
Did it happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you handle that? I mean, we've been sued once or twice, but it was over minor bullshit.
Dude, that we had lawsuits, we had claims, we had defamation articles, we had, just all sorts of crap come. And again, I think it's a good conversation to pivot into this, which is very true, which is a lot of limitation, again, to people on this entrepreneurship game is your ability to handle pressure and stress. And it just became exactly that, stress and pressure. And I don't know, I think it helped me in a lot of sense, because now, these days, like, my foundation of peace and serenity and moving through my day-to-day is like rock solid. Like, I could wake up and get sued at 9 a.m. and have a meeting at 10, and I'd show up and you would never know.
Yep.
Because I don't even care. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, whatever, And so it just kind of, I don't know, again, built more callous. And, the good thing about having a lot of money is you can afford really good lawyers, and a lot of them, and let them do their job, turn it over to them, and focus on making a difference and focus on the things that count. And it's not easy, right? It's, entrepreneurship, business, even handling success, adjusting to success, adjusting to your new life as a successful person. They're all, blessed, good problems to have, but problems nonetheless.
Yeah.
You got to figure it out,
Yeah, that's very cool. I imagine, like, when you're talking about this as well, you're able to logically understand the game of business at the level that you're at. I remember the first time, we got sued for $1,500. Someone was taking us to court for $1,500. And I remember thinking, like, fuck, got to go to court, and like, there's lawyers and stuff. And I remember fighting that. We were 100% in the right. It was just such a stupid thing. But we spent like $14,500 on lawyers when we had no money to prove that we were right. And we ended up winning the case. We kept the $1,500, and then they owed us another $1,500. They owed us $3,000 all in total. But after that, I thought, fuck, we spent 14.5 grand just to be right, really. And we got 3 grand back in return. And then now, playing the entrepreneur game, it is very much a game of almost like chess. You move a piece and someone else moves a piece. It seems a lot more logical these days than emotional, like, someone's trying to take something away from me. It's just...
I think that is a great point, Michael, where I think in the beginning, I responded a lot more emotionally, where today I respond a lot more logically. But I think that comes through going through those experiences of sitting there, having the lawsuit going, no one won here but these damn lawyers.
Yeah.
Their lawyer, our lawyer, they're the only ones that got paid. Everyone else lost money. And coming through the other side, and you get hot-headed and you're like, I'll sue them or I'll fight them back, and whatever it is. In what's funny is at a certain point you run into this litigation fatigue, and it's like you were real angry, but you didn't realize that the litigation was going to go on for 24 months,
Yep.
or 18 months, or 12 months. It's hard to stay that angry through. That's why so many things settle. It's like everyone kind of calms down after 6 months, and they're like, oh, all right, what are we doing? And so I try to just pause and be as unreactive as I possibly can these days to these situations that come, which I'm not perfect at. Like, I'm certainly not. I was ready to
Is
kill.
that Boston in you?
Yeah. Oh, I was giving some people the business earlier today,
Yep.
But ideally that's what I try to model, because the other thing on these issues that I think is such a simple thing that so many people miss, pick up the phone. Get the lawyers out of the deal. Just pick up. If it's me and you and we got this whole thing, the lawyers, who's bad? Is the lawyer is like your friend when you're out and they're like, hey, that guy's looking at you. You know what I mean? Like poking you, like getting you all riled up, because they're fighters. People have to understand what the tool for the job is, right? The lawyer is, all he wants to do is fight and win. But that's not necessarily good for us or them, because we have to pay them to do it. There's all this exposure. We expose ourselves to discovery, potential media stuff, all this stuff. And so now I've learned to, sometimes it's better to pocket our pride, have a little bit of humility, send an email, ask for a meeting, pick up the phone and go, hey, listen, can we get the lawyers out of this for a second? Off the record, no recordings, just me and you, let's talk it out. Can we come to a resolution on this? Could we fight? Yes. You might win, I might win. But what I can promise you is that both of us are going to walk away missing a piece of ourselves. I'm going to get a bite of you, you're going to get a bite of me. Is it really necessary?
Well, the real truth is there's only one person who wins, and it's not either of you guys.
100%.
It's the lawyers.
100%.
Yeah.
And so I find just having conversations a lot of time and good communication, you can talk out a lot of issues and prevent going there. But you have to be the bigger guy. You have to have that humility to pick up the phone, and that pride makes that phone the heaviest thing in the world.
That's very true.
Fuck that guy, it's like, nah.
Yeah.
If you could just put that in your pocket, say a little prayer and be like, God, man, and start to see things through the other person's point of view on why they may be upset, and put yourself in their position, and try to explain to them yours, and a lot of times those feuds just melt away.
That's very cool. Great advice.
Wisdom. That's not how I always was. I used to be hit the nuclear button, they're going to die, we're suing everybody. But you do enough of that and you're like, well, that was stupid. There's only so many, well, that was stupid moments that you can go through before you got to learn the lesson. Stop doing this shit.
You're from Boston and I'm a redhead. It's like, we know what nuclear is.
Yeah. 100%. I try not to do it, but also sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes they're wrong and you have to prove a point. And, I think that being dangerous also keeps the peace. There are times where I've gone I've spent, my biggest lawsuit, I spent more than $1 million on legal fees, and I didn't even think I was going to win. I was just pissed and I had a point to prove. And I was right, but I wasn't going to win. And I was like, yeah, you got me, but we're going to go through this ride together now, motherfucker, And then we did. I dragged that thing into the deep end. And I don't regret it.
So some final quick questions. What drives you now?
I love the game.
Yeah.
I love the game. I love it. I love, the sport. To me, business is a sport. you know, and so I love waking up in the sportsmanship of building every day, working with the team, creating, seeing brick by brick, piece by piece, this business build and grow and scale, and bringing on new people, and the team is growing and revenue is growing, and then problems come up and we find the solution for the problem, which unlocks the next level. And it's like just a big old video game to me of doing this thing. And so that's really, as far as like the hustle and entrepreneurship, it is truly and purely just a love for the game. And a lot of people, I think, start and some persist to do it for a love of the results. But here's the funny thing is, after you sell a business for that much money and you have that much liquidity, you get everything you've ever wanted. And so it can't be about the results anymore. If those are about the results, go play golf, go play tennis, go on your boat, enjoy your results. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's not a car that I can't own. I own a boat, I own a plane, I own the house that I want to live in. And, you know, every other stupid fucking thing that I've ever thought I wanted, I bought, and some of them later on regretted, and I was like, well, that was stupid. Another one of those things. And so now it's really, I've found I've even become less and less flashy. I want less cars. I have a closet full of jewelry. I got the chains, I got diamond watches, I got fucking dude, I got a lot of it, and I barely wear any of it. I got a Lambo I haven't driven in weeks. I take my little G-Wagon. I'm thinking about selling that.
Little G-Wagon, it's a promise.
I know,
it's
but
fucking
I was
massive.
thinking-
It's like a monster truck.
But dude, I could be with 10 cars, and like, it just my point, yes, you're right. And so I'm very blessed to have it. But my point is that it starts to become less and less about that stuff. And it's about the mission, and it's about the game. And that's just the phase of whatever this thing is that we do every day that I'm in. Not to say that you shouldn't do it. Like, I think that's me after I bought all the stuff, not before. I didn't have this fucking religious experience that made me all spiritual and shit. I just bought everything there was to buy and ran out of shit to buy. And now I'm like, well, now what? You can't get up and go to work for a bigger boat. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Well, no, I don't know what you mean, but I definitely understand
exactly
the process of it, yeah.
And so I'm not thinking about those things. Like, in the day-to-day, I'm not thinking about, I'm going to get a bigger house, I'm going to get a bigger boat, I'm going to get a bigger airplane, I'm going to buy more cars. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm thinking about the sportsmanship of the game, building something that is influential, helping people, you know, creating value, winning. You know, I love to win.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what keeps me going.
Through the growth of the company, when you're investing so much money in the growth, how do you deal with the cash flow constraints, and how did you learn how to manage your money and manage the finances, and what do you look at when you're looking at the, you know, the profit and loss, the balance sheets, all of that sort of stuff? Or is that something you just sort of palm off to somebody else? Like,
No, I'm all up in it.
Yeah.
When I built the last business that I sold, I bootstrapped the entire thing. And so I lived so much below my means that the cash flow of the business, the majority of the cash flow, would go back into the company and support its growth, because growth costs money. And so I would just live very modestly at the time. And also I hustled real estate on the side. That's how I got into real estate. I got into real estate because I was building condo developments and selling condos and doing flips and doing land deals and doing commercial deals and all this crazy stuff. And the cash from the real estate year over year while I was building the business paid for my lifestyle. That's how I paid my mortgage. That's how I, you know, had my money. And the money from the business, I just let ride. And I just kept investing it back in, and growing it and growing and growing it. And now today, part of my investments are, you know, I took that pile of liquid capital and started these businesses with it. And so I have it structured that, like, it's essentially, I have my family office, which has an entire team of people that will be with me forever. And then I have two businesses, the addiction treatment business and then this real estate business, both growing explosively. The family office is the lending agent for both of those.
So they lend, and then the
so-
business has to pay back with interest and everything like
Correct.
that. Yep.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because it's like, well, you own all of it. I'm like, yeah, I know, but you still have to make it a legit business.
Yeah.
So there's, in the treatment business, there's debt that sits on the balance sheet that has a PIK accruing interest that it will pay back in first position to my family office. Either I recapitalize it with debt or take on an equity partner or whatever I'm going to do whenever I'm going to do it. That's how that sits there. And then on the real estate business, we really buy and sell a lot of inventory. And so I provide a line of credit to that. And I also finance a lot of the real estate deals that we sell.
Yep.
And so I do a lot of hard money lending. And so it's all fun game, man.
Amazing. Now, final question. Someone's watching this right now. They're wanting to, I guess, become more successful, achieve more in life. You know, that I get that question almost every day. Is like, how do I become more successful? I don't know how different people define it. But if they're watching saying, I want to be more successful, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
Easy to tell you, very hard to do. This is the most practical thing that I think people that can do to improve their life and find success. Most people are hanging out with people that are at their pay grade or below or somewhere around that. You have to change your circle. If you're making $100,000 a year or you're making $60,000 a year or whatever it is, and you go and start hanging out with a bunch of guys that are making $500,000 a year, guess what's going to happen in the next 24 months? You're going to be one of those guys. And the people that you keep around you at times can be a fucking invisible prison. And so you have to level up. And I'm not telling you that, you know, the guys that you grow up with, that you have been friends with your entire life, that aren't super successful, that you have to like go and never talk to again. That's not what I'm saying. Keep the relationships, but put a little distance. And I don't mean distance to even get away from them. You have to put some distance in those relationships just to create space for other people to come into your life. Mm-hmm. And then you have to be incredibly intentional on finding those people and filling that space with those people. If people understood how much impact the people that they spend their time with and communicate with have directly on their life, the trajectory of their life, and the results, they would be so much more selective of the people that they let into their world. And so how do you do that? People will say, well, Eric, how do I find these people? Guys, this is 2024, almost 2025. Michael is from Australia. He found me.
Yeah.
Like he's up here hanging out with a bunch of successful people in Miami, Florida. He lives on the other side of the planet, right? And so you find him on Instagram, you find him on social media, you join masterminds, you join coaching programs. Michael, I know, has joined masterminds. He just came from Patrick Bet-David's 3-day event.
Yep.
Probably paid a bunch of money to go there.
It was $15,000 for 3 days.
He paid $15,000. This is just real world lesson.
That's 15 US as well, by the way. That's not Aussie dollars.
Yeah, $15,000 he paid to be at this event after traveling from Australia to America. So the expense of travel to get in the room, to be around other like-minded people. Real-time question. How many people did you meet?
A shitload.
There you go.
Lot. Yeah.
There you go. And not everyone you meet is going to be great, but at least you're filling the hopper with people that you're going to filter through and assess and start to understand and start to build your network. And so what people don't understand is your ability to do this today is you are at such an advantage than what we were at 15 years ago when I was trying to do this. You guys understand, when I started building my businesses, the internet wasn't even the internet. We were still going to the library and using the Dewey Decimal System to look up fucking books.
I remember that. You'd have to find the...
Looking at the like A357, you know, trying to find the book. Now you just look at your phone and you don't even need to type. You could talk at it. And so the age of information and connectivity is here. And if you have any hustle in you whatsoever, you're going to be able to find a group. You don't need to pay. If you have it, spend the $15,000, but just get around people that are like-minded, trying to do better. There's a but what people need to understand is there's one spiritual principle around it, is there's a gravitational pull to people. If you hang around with winners, you will be pulled into that. If you hang around low-level people, they're gossiping, they're eating like shit, they're talking shit, they're being critical of people, they're negative, they're complainers, they're woe is me, I didn't get a fair chance, but you know, these people, victim, they did this to me and they did this to me. All of that loser shit that happens at that level, it will hold you there. And it will just, you will never, unless you intentionally cut ties with it and remove yourself from that situation and replace it with something better, it will trap you there like a fucking prisoner. And most people that will ask that piece of advice is like, how do I become successful? Aren't willing to make the sacrifice that I had to make, and don't even need to ask, you've had to make, to cut the dead weight, to put the space and be intentional and make the investment in themselves. Like, they think they're just going to find success. No, motherfucker, you have to build it.
I love that, because I remember, I tell this story all the time. I was sitting on my bed, I had $230 in my bank account, and an advert came on for a personal development program to change my life. And I was like, I'd hit rock bottom. I was like, fuck it, something has to change. It was $229. I had $230 in my bank account, and I had to put fuel in my car the next day. And I was like, I had to go borrow money to put fuel in my car. And that was the start of my whole trajectory. And then even to this day, I remember both Jess and myself, my wife, I borrowed money off of her to spend on a VIP ticket to a personal development event.
But was it, here's the interesting thing, Michael. Have you ever thought of it like this? Was it the information that was given to you on the $229 personal development program, or was it the fucking universe that paid attention that you were willing to invest in yourself and believe in yourself?
I think
and it heard that message, and it was like, all right, this guy, he's signaling he's willing to sacrifice, he's willing to struggle, he's willing to endure painful things and do hard things because he wants something better for himself.
Well, I think it's like...
And then everything starts to react off of that vibration.
It's like your house. I believe it's like this, and I don't want to take over because you're on a roll there. But it's like your house. You know, you've got big fences on the outside. If I want to go and see in it, I got to climb the fence to get over it. You know,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people want to see a greater life, but they're not willing to climb the fence or the
100%.
obstacle that's right there. I don't know. I'm
I
very
love
much
that
like
story,
you. Just
though. I
you know.
love that. 230 in the bank account, 229 for the program.
Yep.
And you made the decision. But that decision was so much more than that decision. It was the decision to change your life and go all in and take on the risk.
I still do it now. I flew from the other side of the world, and I think we've dropped about 200 grand on 5 weeks being out here. And
Yep.
it was, we were going to make it work, or we were either going to blow up the business or blow it apart. It was one of those two things. But, you know, if we don't take the risk, we don't show that we're serious.
That's it, man.
You know, so
Very cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
having
it. There
me.
was so
Yeah.
many gold nuggets in here. I hope everyone who's watching this really took a lot of notes, and hopefully go back and watch it again, because, you know, it was very insightful for me as well. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. Very
Awesome.
cool. Bless.
Thank you. Most people waste their life, and I just don't want you to be one of them.